Welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about Amazon CloudWatch. This is a key service that helps us plan, monitor, and fine-tune our AWS infrastructure and applications. It lets you collect, search, and visualize data from your applications and your AWS resources in the form of logs, metrics, and events. Common CloudWatch use cases include the following. Infrastructure monitoring and troubleshooting. Visualize performance metrics to discover trends over time and spot outliers that might indicate a problem. Correlate metrics and log access of your application and infrastructure stacks to understand the root cause of failures and performance issues. Resource optimization, save money and help with resource planning by identifying overused or underused resources. Ensure performance and availability by using AWS auto-scaling to automatically provision new EC2 instances to meet demand. You can have application monitoring. You can create CloudWatch alarms to alert you and take corrective action when a resource utilization, performance, or health falls outside of a threshold that you define. You can log analytics, search, visualize, and correlate logs from multiple sources to help with troubleshooting and identify areas of improvements. It's logging on steroids, but also with alarming and other advanced features that allow you to really leverage AWS resources. So, metrics is a feature that collects numeric performance metrics from both AWS and non-AWS resources, such as your on-premise servers. A metric is available that contains a time-ordered set of data points. Each data point contains a timestamp, a value, and optionally a unit of measure. For example, a data point for the CPU utilization metric for an EC2 instance may contain a timestamp of today's date at 1 o'clock and a value of 75 and a percent as a unit of measure. So all AWS resources automatically send their metrics to CloudWatch. These metrics include things such as the EC2 instance CPU utilization, S3 bucket size, DynamoDB consumed read and write capacity units. CloudWatch stores metrics for up to 15 months, and you can graph metrics to view trends and how they've changed over time. But you can also add your on-premise servers, like it was saying, you can have them reporting in, so you can have a viewpoint and trend over all your resources, not just Amazon resources. Right here is using CloudWatch to graph the CPU utilization for an EC2 instance, right? And it's showing all the metrics and putting the all together to form a graph, right? This is a 1 minute period that is collecting the CPU information, and it's a it's pretty low utilized, 3.5 to the peak is 6% utilization for the CPU. So it's very underutilized, but it's good information to know, right? So it's just an example of a graph of one of a metric that is available. CloudWatch alarms. So CloudWatch watches over the value of metrics. And an alarm will do a single metric. If the metric crosses a threshold that you've specified and it stays there, the alarm will take action. For example, you might configure an alarm to take an action when the average CPU utilization for an instance exceeds 80% for 5 minutes. The action could be to do one of the following. It could use notification using simple notifications service, SNS, and so the SNS allows applications and users and devices to send and receive notifications. SNS uses a publish-subscriber model, wherein a publisher such as AWS service generates a notification, and the subscriber, such as the end user, receives it. And the communication channel that SNS uses is called a topic, and SNS can send notifications to subscribers in a variety of protocols, including HTTP, SQS, Lambda, mobile push, email, and so many others, SMS. And so you could have your CloudWatch alarm send an SNS message, so you could send you an email or send you a SMS text message saying that your servers are overutilized, or it could do an automatic auto-scaling action by specifying an EC2 auto-scaling action. The EC2 auto-scaling service can add or remove instances, and in this case would add, you're at 80% for 5 minutes, you probably want to add an instance just so you don't run out of space and service capacity for your users. So if the metric indicates the instances are overburdened, you can have the auto-scaling respond by adding more instances. And so that's the CloudWatch alarm. It notices, say, 80% for 5 minutes, and then it triggers an auto-scaling event to add more servers. And then the EC2 action, if you're monitoring a specific instance that's having a problem, you can also use the EC2 action to stop, terminate, and recover an instance. So recovering an instance mitigates the instance to a new EC2 host, something you may need to do if there's a physical hardware problem on the underlying hardware host. So you can have it take other actions looking at health and things like that. So CloudWatch alarms are very, very powerful. Helps you automate the processes. You could probably even have it auto scale and send a message to maybe to let you know that you've actually added servers. You may want to know, or you may not, but you can do that with your CloudWatch alarms. CloudWatch dashboards are your one-stop shop for keeping an eye on all your important metrics, and you can create multiple dashboards and add them to metric graphs and the latest values for a metric and cloud alarms. You can add all those to your dashboard, and you can save your dashboard for future use and share them with others. Dashboards can also visualize metrics from multiple AWS regions, so you can keep an eye on the global health of your infrastructure. So it's not just tied to one region. You can look at all your EC2 instances around the globe. So it's very, very powerful, very insightful. Here's a example of a dashboard. Let's just go ahead and open up Amazon here, and let's go to CloudWatch. Alright, so you probably don't have it there, so I'm going to go over here and find it. Let's see here. There's CloudWatch under Management and Governance. That's what I thought it would be. So I have a billing alarm that I have on this account, right? We'll just look at that. So it's probably pretty low because this account shouldn't be used, right? So there's no charges in here, but let's look at, let's see, actions. So I can add it to the dashboard. What I want to do. There we go. So here's the here it is. So I can look at it, view the metrics. I don't want to do that. Sorry. All right. So. Estimated charges, best, let's see here. Edit. There we go. Alright, so it's, I was wondering where the numeric value, so I've set it at $10. Which it should never even get past 2. It's probably too high, but if this account were to run up $10 in charges in a month, or estimated $10 in charges, this alarm will trigger if it's greater than 10, right? Data points just once. It only needs this once. And that is the alarm. And next, it sends me an SNS topic, to my email. Right? So it sends me an email. Alright, so I'm just going to cancel this. But so you can set up a billing alarm fairly easy in CloudWatch, but then you could also set up other alarms. So here we can create an alarm. You select a metric, right? I don't really have anything, but so you would, let's go ahead and create a EC2 instance. I'm just going to review and launch because I don't think I need anything. Oh. Must have got rid of the key pair. Okay. Create a new key pair. CloudWatch. Alright, so we've got an instance being created. It might take some time before it'll show up in CloudWatch. Because it's not even there yet. It's not even running. So what I do want to do is just wait for it to start. Okay, and then now I can at least stop it. You're only billed for disk drive space if it's not running. If it's running, then you get charged the hourly rate of the machine. So now that it's stopped, let's go back to CloudWatch. Okay, so this, let's do alarms. Okay. web server cluster CPU utilization. Okay. I did have a web server cluster at one time, and it had a utilization so of 70 for 2 data points within 2 minutes. Well, let's look at that. So I've set it at 70%, 2 data points. Let's go ahead and edit this. So it checks it every 5 minutes. If it's greater than 70%, it has to hit 2 times, 2 alarms. So it would be 10 minutes. So we probably don't, probably would have wanted to do a little better than that, but you might want to do 1 minute periods in that case. That way it'd be 2 minutes. And then once again, this is going to send an email notification. But if I had scaling, right, so you can see that I could send an email notification, and then I could add auto scaling action, right, in alarm, EC scaling group. I have to have a group, but I don't have it. So if I had an auto scaling group, I would select it, and then I would take the following actions, which would be add server, or what, add 1 server, add 2 servers, right? So you can add that and automatically do that right here, or you can this is for EC2 metrics. So let's see if we got our EC2 server now available. Select a metric. No, I don't have it. It's not there yet. It's going to take some time. Probably have to have it running. No, gonna have to need this to be running. That's probably true. Alright, let's go ahead, let's start it and let's run it, and then we'll continue on. Get some metrics, and then I'll look at this in a little bit here. Alright, well, we'll let that go, and then we'll come back to it. So CloudWatch logs collects and store logs from AWS and non-AWS sources. So you can do both AWS and non-AWS sources. And it makes it easy to view, search, and extract custom metrics from them. So you can log events, streams, groups. You configure your application and your services to send logs to CloudWatch. And a log event is analogous to a line in a log file, and always contains a timestamp and an event message. Many AWS services produce their own logs called vended logs that you can stream to CloudWatch logs. Such logs include Route 53 DNS query logs, so all the DNS queries in your environment could be logged. VPC flow logs, we'll talk about more about that when we get to the more detail about the virtual private cloud, VPC. CloudTrail logs, which we will talk about here just momentarily. After CloudWatch, we'll get into CloudTrail. And then CloudWatch logs can also receive custom logs from your applications, such as your web server access logs. You can log who's accessing your web server, and you can log that to CloudWatch. CloudWatch logs organize log events by log streams by sorting log events from the same source into a single log stream. For example, your web server access logs from a specific web server instance would be stored in one log stream, while Route 53 DNS query logs would be stored in a separate log stream. CloudWatch further organizes log streams into log groups. To organize related log streams, you can place them into the same log group. For instance, if you have several log streams that are collecting web server log events from multiple web servers, you can group all of those log streams into a single log group, your web server group, right? CloudWatch logs store the log events indefinitely by default, but you can configure a log group's retention setting to delete events automatically. So retention settings range from 1 day to 10 years. You can also archive your logs by exporting them to an S3 bucket, and then you can use the archive process in the lifecycle process in the S3 bucket. Metrics filters. A metric filter extracts data from log events in a log group and stores that data in a custom CloudWatch metric. For example, suppose you have a log event from a database server that contains the time in milliseconds it takes to run a query. You may extract that value and store it as a CloudWatch metric so you can graph it and create an alarm to send a notification when it exceeds a certain threshold. You could also use metric filters to track the number of times a particular string occurs. This is useful for counting the number of times a particular event occurs in a log, such as an error code. For example, you might want to track how many times a 403 forbidden error appears in a web server log. You can configure a metric filter to count the number of times the error occurs in a given time frame, say 5 minutes for example, and record that value in a CloudWatch custom metric. Metric filters let you extract or derive quantitative data from log events, so the metric values will always be numeric. You can't store a non-numeric string such as an IP address in a metric. CloudWatch events. You could start by creating a rule to define the events to monitor, as well as the actions you want to take in response to those events. You define the action to take by selecting a target, which is an AWS resource. Some targets you can choose from include the following: Lambda functions, EC2 instances, SQS queues, SNS topics, ECS tasks. So CloudWatch responds to events as they occur in real time, unlike CloudWatch alarms, which take action when a metric crosses and remains crossing a numeric threshold. CloudWatch events trigger immediately. For example, you can create a CloudWatch event to send an SNS notification whenever the EC2 instance terminates. Or you can trigger a Lambda function to process an image as soon as it hits the S3 bucket. Alternatively, you can create a schedule to automatically perform actions at irregular intervals. For example, to save money, you might create a schedule to shut down development instances every day at 7 p.m. after the developers have ideally stopped working. Right, so you can use that and schedule an event to shut down your EC2 instances at a certain time. It would save you money, and it's better than an alarm, because the alarm you have to meet the threshold for certain so many times, whereas with an event it can be triggered by a time event, and just crossing over it, and it triggers immediately. Let's see if we've got any metrics. Our server's been running a minute or two now, but CloudWatch is a little bit delayed, so we'll go to CloudWatch here. We'll see if our resource is available now. Okay, so we do have EC2, right? So we've got insufficient data, but we do have EC2. It is talking to our CloudWatch. So let's see if we can create an alarm. So yes, now we've got EC2 data. So we can do EC2 instance data, and so CPU utilization is the metric. Let's see here. Right, so we've got the graph, so we can select the metric. All right, so CPU utilization, average. Right, and so we're going to do this. Define is greater than, must be a number, so we're going to go with let's go with 10%, and we're going to go lower and equal than, right? So if it's less than 10%, go with this. We're going to do one data point, and we're going to take it. We could send a notification, but we're going to do add an EC2, and we're going to go ahead and stop this instance, right? And then go next. No, it does need us to, okay. We'll just do this. We'll use the existing topic. EC2 stop. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and create the alarm. So now we've got our EC2 stop. And so it's going to stop our instance as soon as it has a CPU utilization of less than 10%. For 5 minutes. So this is it will take 5 minutes for this to run. It's got to collect at least the first 5 minutes, and then probably another 5 minutes. This is probably not a good use of the alarm, but I mean, if you had extra utilization, and if you got down to 10% and you had multiple servers, maybe it's a good thing, but it's probably an impractical alarm. But you can see what you can do with this. So status is in alarm. So if we go back here to EC2, and we can see it is stopping. So it actually did trigger, right? It's in alarm status, and so it was less than 10%, and it shut down the server. So that's our CloudWatch alarm. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just terminate this instance. No need to keep them in here. Alright. Okay, so that's CloudWatch. So now we go to CloudTrail. CloudTrail keeps detailed event logs of every action that occurs against your AWS resources. So each event that CloudTrail logs includes the following parameters: the service, the name of the API action performed, the region the resource is located in, the response elements. In the case of an API operation that changes or creates a resource, this contains information about the results of the actions. For example, the response elements for a run instance action to launch an EC2 instance would yield information such as the instance ID and the private IP address. It also will log the principal that made the request. This may include the type of principal, IAM user or a role, the date and time of the request, and the IP address of the requester. All right, so go over here and let's go over here to management and go to CloudTrail. So this logs everything, but right now I don't have a trail. You have to enable this, and they charge you for it, right? So the pricing, you get a free tier. Alright, 90-day history, you can view and search. There's no minimum fee. Okay. Per 100,000 data events, so it's pretty inexpensive, but let's go into our CloudTrail. So there's no events yet because we just created it, so it's not going to show us anything. Alright, so we'll come back to that maybe at another time. Alright, so we're going to in the video here. We'll pick up with APIs and non-API events in the next video.